Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Tuesday Melt stream with the 2MK team. As always, it is Tuesday, and that means Melty Blood. We've been making swift progress in terms of ability to understand matchups. So, today probably is going to be a bit more about learning combos, and our combo dummy slash big challenge boss for the day is Omni Rabbit until someone else appears. All of us who haven't had time to practice combos are only going to stand a chance against Omni really by implementing some of them. This game has a little bit too much capacity for you to win out just by scaling, win out just by shield interactions or frame dodge. A bunch of stuff where your opponent is not going to take much damage unless you know exactly how to keep your combo going. Or how to get a good setup slash pressure off the situation you create by winning in neutral. So that's probably what people are working on today. We seem to have slight lag, but I'm not sure how bad it really is going to be. Because that could easily be just what I'm seeing. The rollback tends to make it work either way, and of course if you want to join in, you are as always looking for the 2MK Lounge. This is usually an Atlantic Rim lounge as far as we're concerned. You should have a decent connection to everyone in the lounge if you could get to the Atlantic Ocean in probably an hour and your internet isn't terrible. But today it seems we have mostly our East Coast US group around. So if you are in that area, you can expect to have even better connections to pretty much everyone as I've seen for now. There are about 4 slots open left to jump in on, and you can expect some people to be passing their turn, or simply the fact that the consecutive play means that 3 wins will push the winner off. So if you expect to be able to win consistently, know that you're probably only coming in for 3 matches. But of course we'll do our best to give you as much challenge as we can, even if that challenge is basically only neutral interactions, until combos get better. That said, neutral interactions make a lot of difference in this game because between that and defense, that's where most of your damage comes from. Combos seem to be mostly helpful for building up meter because they scale so poorly after a while on most characters, with basically Aoko and Shiki being the ones where this doesn't happen, making them better pressure characters than most of the cast as far as I'm aware, but that might have been changed in some balance patch recently that I didn't notice. I haven't been keeping track of Melty's status as much as I probably should. I forgot I was alone. If you of course have your own strong combos, as noted, bring it. Because today we are explicitly working on, we probably feel okay, I've kinda got the neutral, I kinda understand the matchups. If a new person shows up with matchup knowledge that needs to be reviewed, I'll probably be talking then. But if not, then you can probably expect there to be a lot of hitting. That's a good example of what I'm talking about. This game is mostly a 3-touch game, but not innately so. On defense, it's generally not. But for defensive characters, it can be. Part of the problem I've had so far myself is that rushdown characters don't seem to have the same overall effectiveness for this reason. Because relying on the throw mix-up makes things really hard in the long run. But I'm not here to complain about my character. I'm gonna break some defense. That, for example, isn't a lot of damage. I'm not really worried about that one because it's scaling problems, right? Same here. I do have to care, because, again, it's still a lot of damage. But it's still not a, this situation has become a 3-touch. It's still for, I still have to care about my opponent's movement more than I care about that specific aspect of it. If I play neutral well enough, it'll become a 5-touch, and all will be well in that regard. The correct answer here, therefore, is to be so pressury that my opponent must defend, and then use that against them. Because as long as my opponent is on defense, I'm going to take less damage. There are some characters for whom this is not true, but Roa is middling. Roa does about the same amount of damage all the time. It more so has to do with his meter and the spacing that you were in when you got hit than the specific aspects of his moves in that regard. The main thing as an offensive player is that you must create your own win condition. And every time you fail it, your opponent is going to get some amount of damage. The question is how much, and can you do anything about it? But in the end, I am going to have to learn to break through this, or switch back to my style of simply not attacking once I've got an advantage. My opponent does need to work on his offense, in the sense of understanding how to deal with people who don't care about his offense, but it's just not, I can't do it for long enough. But here's my win condition, for example. Right here, if I don't move at all from here, I've won. This is mainly to do with the amount of meter my opponent has. And their expectations no longer matching up with the reality. Their expectation is that I'm going to attack in specific timings because I keep attacking. But once I reduce my own frequency enough, it's no longer possible. Still, at the end of the day, there will always be players who have equal offense to me, and I can't really be relying on the fact that they don't have defense. That's just basically a toss-up, right? So, now you might ask why I used that there. That's why. My opponent expects an attack, gets none, and doesn't know exactly how to respond. It's best to not worry about the missed executions too much, because that is the weakness. Both sides will always be worried about missed executions. But there, again, I attacked, my opponent was in the same state they were always in, because I attack. Again, same thing. I would have won more there by doing nothing, because the thing that my opponent is conditioned to do is wait for me to do things. Same here. But if I stop long enough to reduce their visibility of my intentions, it is still a good way to create the problem. It does not, however, stand up to most players because the meter requirement is much higher. Even that was probably a good example because my opponent flinches mid-offense, partially because they're used to me dealing with it in one way or another. Unnerving your opponent by simply stopping requires that you have absolute confidence that your own, not necessarily defense, but that your threat is so strong that you can react so fast that you're just not going to be able to do anything. Alright, we are all full up, which means we have lots of potential boss characters to deal with here. But as this match is probably not one where that matters, I'll probably not have much to say. The general thing to remember is that Mario is not terribly good at following up at mid-range. He tends to either advance with having relatively shorter buttons, or rely on options that don't necessarily get him anything. He's a relatively slow character to break you down if you haven't made a mistake. And that means you get to keep quiet for quite a while.
おいおい、マジかよ。そりゃ本物か？
もちろん。ここがあなたの終着です。ミハイル・ロア・バルダムよ。オープン・ユア・マジック・サーキット。ファイト。
暴力賛成。遅い。シリナ、お別れ。もらいた。
まだまだ。諦めるカウンター。
ちょいと言ってな。
諦める。まだまだ。
シリナ、
制圧行きなさい。
One of the main problems that beginners have is that not knowing the moment to pick this because they'll end up in a problem in some other way. Because the fact that it is a three-touch game doesn't necessarily mean that you're doomed. It simply means that your opponent has a different idea of what they're trying to do than you might have. You're going to get beaten eventually by them having more meter if you don't defend properly, but any individual match where the meter isn't the way they kill you has all sorts of options. But the first touch leads to more touches, so you must have at least the basics of defense down and try not to get too freaked out by what happens. And that usually means you have to do an actual calculation on what options your opponent could use that actually hurt you. One of the main things you have to learn in games in general, fighting games, is what is actually going to hurt me versus what is just me getting hit for a little bit. There, for example, would have been a heat moment. Not necessarily because you expect to win the match, but there's no second round, so there's no further round to go. You could argue, well, I would save the meter for the next match. Or you could have thought, my opponent is going to bait this. But while you're on the ground, you have to be taking that time on the ground to think about what exactly is likely to happen here. Is my opponent probably looking for just the bait because it's easy to do this? Or are they actually going to try to kill me with pressure because I have, for example, not shown that I could do this before? This is why we generally try to tell people to practice against people they don't find quite so overwhelming. Someone who just about puts them on edge, but doesn't necessarily deal with them in every way. Because once you've got control of neutral, if you're good enough at neutral from other games, it normally works out. But then you have to think to yourself, do I actually care about this? And if you are good enough at neutral, people who rely a lot on pressure are more likely to go for their pressure option than they are to bait you. For various reasons, especially if you're not in the corner at the time. So you can absolutely focus on winning in neutral. Understand that your opponent's pressure is a way you're just going to take damage. It's not necessarily that you have to be able to get away from this every time. You just have to understand what it is. And yeah, sometimes you're just gonna get hit. Big deal. Once you've gotten past that hurdle mentally, it's usually much easier to keep up with opponents who you might have otherwise felt, yeah, this person is just going to destroy me. Here they are doing so much damage. Just make the damage go away. And that sounds, obviously, like I'm just going, oh, here, do this super easy thing when it's not easy. But I'm not saying don't get hit. I'm saying make the damage go away. And in games like this, where the way that people do damage is so highly dependent on these things, you can figure out a way to make the damage go away quite often.
んじゃねえの。暴力賛成。
もういい？ご案内。
たま暴力賛成。いいもん。
バージョンはマジック。目が覚めた。
セーフ。あえてくれよ。マイナス決める。
もういいんだ。
おそそ限界。
ゲット。転べてそこ。ワンツーヘリおまけ。はあほら抜けないとそこ転べ。オッケー。
セーフ。生きるなよ。
はあスカッと。おっとスカッと。
やる悲しいんだよ。死の行動、生の賛同、輪廻の鼓動。そう何もかも無意味だったとね。もらっちゃ
弱点火星までぶっ飛ばす。大きいの好きでしょ。バルディンのだって失礼。おっと
甘よ。やる
ご案内ババン。こっちこっち。おっと
甘よ。
カウンター。キマおまけ。キマおまけ。そうそうゲット。いっただけ。
なんというなんという。
いい。あなたオープンはマジック進学者じゃない？ファイト。
もらっちゃう。セーフ。
もういい。もういい。そこか。
もらっちゃう。下
も
のバラス。
もういい。
セーフ。まだまだ。
そこ。おっとビーム。
俺の変化見切った。
カウンター。
甘よ。
アクセル全開。はい一発。見える？行くわ。
もらっちゃう。
だーっと。ご案内本命。そこ。決まおまけ。今ね。作って回して打ち砕く。驚いた？
やる暴力賛成。
やって投げる。よしタ
や
ーン
るじゃないか。
はマジックサー
焼きがいがある。
行くわよ。もういい？やる。
暴力賛成。
転べ決めそこ。決まる。おまけ12じゃないけど転べ行くわよ。
たま暴力死に改めます。
もういい？バイバイ気持ちいい。
俺のやめそこだ。
ビーム
ライソ伝送。
反撃バルゲット。
甘よ。
だーっと
もちもらっちゃう。
こっちこっち。そこ
そうだそうだよ。
勝負。スカッと行くわよ。
死に改めます。暴力賛成。
もうシューティング。ぬる丸見えよ。こっちこっち。ビーム容赦忘れた。そこ KO。
勝利ご苦労様だったな。
演どなたか存じませんがここで倒しておきますね。あ、指揮から私のこと聞いてる感じね。オープンユアマジックサーキットよファイト。スマッシュこっちこっち。ビームまだまだ甘口ですね。どうせおったひょいスクッスクッこれで決めホイサーどうおまけもう一度倒れなさい。も もういい落とすカウンターいやなんじゃかセーフアウトそこです悪いわねピカーセーフアウトセットカウンター勝負スカッともう一匹引きますバンオッケーバンババンゼルトゥルーやだーってと今そこオッケーほい負けなさいけどねはぁ痛いじゃないですかカウンターだーって悪いわねピカーン逃がしませんいった逆転そこです大きいのカウンター逆転言っとく記憶はこっちアクセル全開お互い予想より動ける相手のようですねファイトカウンターそこおまけ大きいのつくでしょオッケーせいや深く軽いひょい見え見えですよまだまだ悪いわピカナイキャッチ偉い偉いおっと今そこだねそこそれビーキャットセットヒーターカウンターいやなんじゃかポポーっと反撃いこっかそうそう必中カウンタートゥルーキャッチ終了許したまえいやゼトゥキャッチ逆転しよっかそうそう逆転しよっかさてこれでいくわこれ決めほいさワンツーフィニおまけ趣味じゃないけどもう一度甘いですスクこっちこっちカウンターだーってとショートタイムポポーっとまだやりますやっと回路マジックサーク行くわよファイトフェイスカット一角で終了許したまえご愛お見通し行きますこれくらい軽いものですこんな何のそこそこですだーってとそこだ行くわよ強襲スイート失礼しアクセル全開オッケーゴアお趣味じゃないけどゴア行くわよいいとあげましょう反撃おっとバナプーチ本気今出しましょう深くせ反撃容赦そこプーチ本気出しましょうそこ負けますはいゼロトゥルーキャットそれセットやそこ偉い偉いどうですはいそうそう必中そやおっとセットヒート失礼終わりですかお返しですカウンターいい内容だったわオープンユアマジック存じませんよファイトおっとヒート偉い偉い転べ決める偉い偉い行く甘口ですねビーム最低それ手やおっとゼルトゥルーキャッチなんのそれ弱い行きますよキャリバーこんな追いつくやる逃がしませんこんなヒートそこですそうそうじゃそこいや行きますキャリバー逆転ゆるいこのあたりこれ決まりおまけおっと全部キャットタイムタイムはマジックサーキこの行くわ偉い偉い大きいのつけるシューティング行くわよいいわね見え見えですよ甘いです偉い偉い決まり甘いですまだまだまだまだひょいカウンターうまくかわせるスクレイ転べたわひょいよってあおっとピピ本気うち本気カウンターヒータースマッシュ大きいのつくでしょ手加減できませんからね嫌な倒れなさいこっちがおっとそこ式セイほいさちょっと大きいわよそこ負 これで最後。それ。おっと。このカント装填。この一撃で土くれに帰るがいい。追いつく。いいじゃない。メテオライト。メシアン。フェイタル。追いつく。アクセル全開。カウンター。いや痛いですよ。ポポーっと逆転。投げ払え。痛いじゃないですか。ゼロ。カウンター。なんのすくせ。結構そうでしょう。まオープンはマジックサーキット。こっちこっち。おっとそこです。あらじゃほいっとそこセピカー。いっただけピカースクッ。いや軟弱。ゼガートセット。なんのひょい無駄です。転べて偉いやかましい不運です。こっちこっち。軽いのはスクゼロトゥルキャットシューよ許したまえ。ゼロトゥルキャット反撃行こうか。いやなんのほいっとまだまだシューティング。オッケーセット。ピカーンメシアン。なんの音まだまだほいっよゼロ甘いです。ほいっいや軟弱。ポポーこんなところですか。ターンユアマジックサーキット。このファイト。こっちこっち。そこですよっセイスクそこゼロキャットセット。もういいカウンターそこどうおまけはあフランメテオライト深くカウンターまだまだ引きまよーし深くで倒れなさい。いたせっやっこ大きいの好きでしょ。そこ本気危ないシュよ許したまえ。反撃行こう。なんのもういいナイキャッチ行きますよ。信じたゼトゥルキャットシュよ許したまえ。いやゼトゥルキャット逆転メシアン全開。これで最後いっただけよ。手加減できませんからね。引きまか踊りなさい。さーて無駄だ。勝負反応まだまだ。お互い予想より動ける相手のようですね。こっちこっちこっちこっち。落とす終わりですか。はあゼロトゥルキャット手加減できませんからね。ゼトゥルだーっとあいたいや痛いですよ。ポポーおいそこですやるスクッセ危ないとだとはぎった追いつく決めばおまけほいさ危ないとだと強襲ゼロトゥルそれそうそこだ決めおまけ甘口ですね。ご案内スカッと負け見せてあげましょう。ゼロトゥルキャットもういいゼロいやドライ恐れなさい。いやそう必中層だってとアクセル全開。行くわよ。どうスクおっと失礼行くな行くわよ。決めほいさどう決まりおまけはあ悪いけど手遅れね。これで最後です。スカッと負けません。カウンターやられた。まったく 転生の終焉です。オープンユアマジックサーキット。ファイト。無駄です。まだ。
ほらよ。
痛いじゃなくてカウンター。おっと。いや飛ばせ。その隙もらった。いや全トゥキャット。
たまん。
いやまだまだ。
踊ってらす。楽しい。
深くでカウンター。あらら。
そうだ。
いや飛ばせ。不要ない。そこです。いやそれ。いや中罰。
そうだろおい。
不要なり。汚らわし。ターンユアマジックサーキット。
くれるなよ。
ファイト。セット。
まだまだ死に払ってます遅い。
ゼロ。
息苦しい。ここから死に払ってます
終わりですか。ゼロ。トゥル。
いいんじゃねえの。セックス
痛いじゃないですか。いやそれ。
耐えてくれよ。遅い。チリナ熱い肉せ
倒す。何時天文に至らず。
そうだよ。お別れ。
倒す。踊りなさい。
ほら来た。
それ。
残念。
これまだ終わってはいません。
お互い温まってきたかい。
目が覚めました。それ。ファイト。ヘイト。不要ない。そこでスクーセ。いやヘイトル。いや飛ばせ。キャリバー。
ここからライス伝送。
深くで倒れなさい。
目も当てられないぞ。チリナお別れだ。
もう一何時天文に至らず。まだまだ。
耐えてくれよ。遅い。マイナス。お別れだ。
倒す。
どうだ。遅い。
倒す。
下で
見せてあげましょう。
ここからバラす。
それで
どうだ。
何時天文に至らず。
ここからぬるいね。やめとけ。
必中。
そこだろ。
カウンターゼロトゥルキャテ。それ。
やり始めていい。
倒す。
耐えてくれよ。
無駄です。まだまだ。
踊ってバラす。
それ。逃がしません。いやこれ。
下踊ってバラす。
倒す。
それ。下で。どう
兵の代行が果たされないなど。転生の終焉です。赤社の蛇。
さて、そうであればよいのですが。
オープンユアマジックサーキット。ファイト。
もらえ。
ヘイ。
もらえ。
カウンタースクセ。
たまに暴力参戦。
もう一度。いやこれで
バラス耐えてくれよ。遅い。
いや
踊ってバラス。
笑わせてこれ式
ほらよ。そらよ。
痛いじゃないですか。いや式
踊って
引きません。倒れなさい。
よそう
ヘイト。いやせ取った。いや中罰。不要ない。そこです。
そこだ。
取った。いや止めなさい。キャリバー。
やり
逃がしません。
ほう。やり本気ってや
弱い。強襲か。
つ。
ヘイ。
生きるなよ。
今そこでメシアン。ヘイ。
遅い。
設定を大校舎の戦いを教えましょう。タ
や
ーンユア
るじゃないか。
マジックサーキッ
焼きがいがある
ト。ファイト。
熱い肉せ。
もう一度ヘイト。
目も当てられない。遅い。チリナ
痛いじゃないですか。ヘイ。
やってくれ。死に払って
それで
もらえ。いい君の
ただ甘いパンです。黙りなさい。ヘイ。
ぬるいね。
スクセシュ強襲。
ここからだ。
ヘイト。ヘイ。スクセ取った。いや中罰。ヘイ。ヘイ。絶対捕らえた。いや
味見ていい。
痛いじゃない。 ひょい
見えるかそこだろ。
笑わせます。
どう
まだまだ
楽しいね。
見せてあげましょう。
ここから残
セル
たまん
セット
たまん
弱い黙りなさい。不要ない。
やりど
笑わせます。セッ
ういいんじゃねえの。楽しいね。
トそれで
見
まだ
えるかい
まだ
残
セッシュいやまだまだ
です
甘いこちらです。これ
下で
手をれるわけには。
もうちょいと頼む。
バーンユアマジックサーキットファイトフェイタルやっときなさい。不要ないそこです。おいおっと
どう
今そこでその隙もらった。いやゼトゥーガタ
ここから残
いや
念。生きるなよ。
シュッ終わりですか。
耐えてくれよ。
汝天文に至らずゼトゥーガタ
やり暴力さんだ。
ヒャリバー
やりそこだろ。生きてだからな勝利。ご苦労様だったな。
チリバチリ転生の終焉です。オープンユアマジックサーキットファイトそれ
チリな。熱いくせ。
もう一度倒れなさい。
耐えてくれよ。お別れだ。
もう一度
目に当てられないぞ。熱いくせ。
倒す。今そこだね。その隙もらった。ゼトゥーガタ
たま暴力
それでセッ
そこだろ。セット
トこれで最後です。
ここから
セブコードスクエ
ここ悲しいんだよ。耐えてくれよ。
アノーカウンタースクルゼルトゥルキャキ大校舎のターンユアマジックサーキット
焼きがいがある。
ファイトヘイヘイ不覚で
やめとけ。
痛いじゃないです今そこでね弱い愚か
君の
安易ですヘイ
そうだ。
カウンター終わりですか。ヘイ
楽しい。遅い。
弱いこちらですゼルトゥルキャタ汝天文に至らずゼルトゥキャタ
たま始めて
終わりでひょいこちらですゼルトゥルキャタ汝天文に至らず
やり
やっとヘイ
だな勝利。ご苦労様だったな。
チリはチリに優ヒアカブスはニューチャレンジ。
I've learned over time that I don't like this matchup.
さばきの時間です。
The reason I don't like this matchup is because while my character is fairly good at attacking the air, she's not good at catching CL when CL decides to stay there like indefinitely. So I end up playing a very sort of annoying long-term air neutral. Oh, I forgot that happens like that. And of course this character hits really hard. So I'm constantly doing the accuracy chase game. I'm constantly ending up doing stuff like that. And I have to air throw constantly for nearly no damage. See? So I've been working on the strategy for this. when I lack the concept of how to do it. The best I can come up with for now is the fact that I can use her claw in the air to move around while still protecting myself. See? It's not great though. It's another situation where my opponent's damage is just too much better. And they do that all the time. But it does a decent job of making them change the way they fight, which is kind of helpful, but it's not enough. See? So this is going to turn into a big chase all the time. And the better way for me to deal with this, probably, is to learn to do better confirms off the same thing. But from the perspective of, is my opponent actually hitting me? I'm kind of sad that they don't usually tend to. They more so beat a thing that I did in order to try to chase them. See? In this case, of course, I must defend. Eventually. But the defending isn't a good idea either, as just demonstrated. And I keep on forgetting about that move. So, strategically, I understand this matchup pretty well. Physically, it's borderline stupid because the thing that you're constantly facing, or rather the thing that you're constantly chasing, is a character that doesn't care about this at all. So I obviously need to train this, but the problem with training this is that it's not actually useful. The character I'm facing always has this ability, but the player isn't necessarily utilizing the character well. They're utilizing my own character's weakness well. And usually in that game, in a game like this, it means that your best bet is to switch character. But I don't feel like playing a different character, and I don't feel like disrespecting my opponent by basically going, yeah, I am not willing to try this. But at the same time, you have to question whether or not your opponent is actually trying to fight you or not. Either way, thankfully for the overall thing, before I start getting into some rant that's probably more salty than I intend, we have reached the end of the stream. And I'm probably not going to train on it, but I would suggest for anyone else, you're probably in a worse situation than Arcueil is, simply because you can't necessarily even do that sort of air move. But if you pay attention to the spot that CL can't get to, because there is such a spot, it's just that, again, my character can't attack. My character can't, like, pin her down because of it. If you manage to figure that spot out, you'll be better off. You can find all of our bots at our website 2-mk.org, and information on whether or not we'll be streaming on any given day at 2_mk_FGC on Twitter. I'm obviously going to let the last match run off, even though it's technically past the end of stream time, I think. But you might only get one of these. As unfortunately, even though I will stay around, or rather stay logged in so that the lounge doesn't close, I'm probably not able to continue to talk anything at all about the rest of this matchup, and therefore there's not much point in continuing. If you would like to see it, of course, I think the lounge might be full, but you can try jumping in anyway. Remember, of course, that it is one of the Atlantic Rim lounges that we always have. And at the moment, everyone should be within approximately that space. That was such an, like, ridiculously... Nope, it's still the correct way to win it. Oh, but there we go.
マジックサーキット行きますファイト巻きつけせーのまったく私からカウンターいいな慎みなさい汚してく巻きつけそうかいい度胸だせーのお願いだよなカウンターせーのやっくだらねだよな
If I can say one thing about the memorableness of the music in this game, I find myself hearing it in my head. Like, I'm not doing anything else. I can't think, I know this theme. It just pops up in my head because it's just that catchy sometimes. And it's not usually trying to be like deep fighting game music. This is, what even is this? City pop, I guess? Which, very suitable given where they are, but overall, it's kind of weird. But with that, therefore, I bid you good night. This has been Rillian 14 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.